Hello, everybody, and welcome to this online session where we're looking in detail at holding effective target and support meetings, which is a really crucial part of the work together to improve school attendance guidance. My name is Adam Luke, and I head up the school attendance policy and strategy team at the DFE. And I'm joined and have the pleasure to be joined this afternoon by Paul Baker from my team, who is going to talk us through in a moment the expectations that are set out in the guidance around target and support meetings, and one of the department's attendance advisors, Jane Lowe, OBE, who is going to add some illustration around what good looks like in that space from the schools and local authorities she's had the pleasure of working with over the last couple of years. So I think I'll get straight into it, Paul, and come over to you for to take us through what the guidance says.
Great, thanks, Adam. So as Adam says, I'm just going to give a bit of the policy background into targeting support meetings. And you'll see as I bring up the slides that we're going to bring up some excerpts from working together to improve school attendance. We've shortened some bits just to make it easily readable on the slides. But the thing I would say at the start is most of the excerpts you'll see on the screen are taken from pages 34 to 37 of the guidance. So it's a relatively short section. So if you're going away and then looking at how you plan your targeting support meetings, I think it is just worth a quick read of those sections before you start. Great. So just to start with a bit of a wider context. So for those of you who are maybe a bit less familiar with the guidance, Chapter 4 outlines that local authorities are expected to have a school attendance support team, which should provide 4 core services to schools free of charge. So you can see all 4 of those core services on the screen. So you've got comms and advice. So local authorities are expected to bring schools together in their area to provide a bit of that advice, but also to provide them with a named contact who can respond to queries as appropriate. Targeting support meetings, which is why we're here, is a second core function. And then on the third one, we've got multidisciplinary support for families. So that's the idea that actually the school attendance support team can act as that link and provide schools with access to some of the wider local authority services that can provide support for out-of-school barriers. And lastly, the last core function is legal intervention. So again, the local authority will take forward legal intervention where support isn't working or hasn't been engaged with in line with that section of the working together guidance. We're not going to dwell in this session anymore on those other 3 core functions, but I think it is helpful to see how they all fit together. And in fact, there is quite a bit of overlap. So within targeting support meetings, of course, the local authority will be providing schools with that communication and advice. You will together be discussing multidisciplinary support, and the local authority you will be discussing legal intervention as well in cases where it is needed. So in terms of what the expectations are from targeting support meetings, we've got some text here on the slide. So we say that all local authorities are expected to organise regular targeting support meetings or TSMs with each school in their area. So the school's attendance leads and their point of contact in the school attendance support team can build strong relationships and work collaboratively. That's a really strong theme that we'll be talking a bit more about later. So that they can identify, discuss and agree action plans and joint approaches for severely absent pupils where they don't already have a plan in place. So that's those pupils that have absence levels that are higher than 50%. Then so they can discuss and agree approaches for persistently absent pupils, so pupils with absence rates of 10% or higher, so averaging 1 day a fortnight, where they have barriers to attendance that require a multi-agency response, so some out-of-school barriers. There's also an expectation that schools and local authorities will agree which agency will act as a lead practitioner. We expect that this will be the school in most cases, but it can be a local authority or partner team where there are multiple needs, and that team is the most appropriate service to take the lead. And then the last point on the slide, so where schools seek it, local authorities can conduct data analysis as part of that targeting support meeting. I think it's worth saying at this point that there is an expectation earlier in the guidance that schools will be doing their own regular data analysis to identify pupils and cohorts that require support. So I'd say this probably isn't a key part of the targeted support meeting, but for example, it might be that the school's identified that absence is driven by X amount of leave of absence or Y amount of illness, and the local authority may just be able to help them dig into that a bit further and see how that compares with other schools in their area with similar demographics. We say, it's not on the screen, but in the next paragraph to this section, we say that local authorities should design a meeting structure that works for their individual local areas and the schools within it. So again, Jane will go into a bit more detail in her section about what that might look like for your local authority. Great. So then we've got what the expectations are in terms of frequency. So you can see the text on the slide, but the first point we make is that the frequency of meetings should be proportionate to the level of attendance challenges in the school. So for schools with attendance levels below the national average for their phase, so that's primary, secondary or special, it's expected that local authorities meet at least termly in all cases. So for those of you who are familiar with the existing non-statutory version of the guidance that runs up until 19th of August, that has been the expectation for all schools. And the reason for these termly meetings isn't to hold those schools to account. It's very much about enabling the right support to be put in place with the school and the local authority as joint partners. Where the school has attendance levels above the national average for their phase, the frequency may be reduced to 1 TSM per school year, where both the school and local authority agree. But of course, where a school can request a more regular meeting where they feel it's appropriate. And it may be, for example, that the school has really quite a good attendance level and loads of people who are attending really regularly, but they still have quite a few pupils who are persistently or severely absent. Actually, they think it'd be really beneficial just to have a more regular meeting. There have been a couple of queries about how best to work out whether you are above or below the national average. I think for those of you who are sharing your daily attendance data with ourselves, with the department already, which this will be mandatory for all state-funded schools from the new school year, and 91% of you are doing that already. That tool allows you very quickly to compare your attendance data nationally for primary and secondary schools, and just will let you very easily see whether you're above or below the 50th percentile. And we also publish the year-to-date average absence rates for primary, secondary and special schools on the .gov.uk absence statistics page. But I'd say the view your educational data is probably the best option for that. We do say, again, it's not on the screen, we do say that there's no expectation for a meeting for schools with the very strongest attendance. So where there's no cases to be discussed that require local authority involvement. So that would be schools where there's no severely absent pupils and no persistently absent pupils who have barriers that require a multi-agency response. If that is you, then that's absolutely brilliant. But I think for the vast majority of schools will probably fit into one of the two categories on the screen. And as a general rule, if the local authority thinks a meeting needs to happen, then the school is expected to take part, and vice versa. If the school believes that they need or want a meeting, then they can request that from the local authority. Excellent. So I'll move on. The last point in terms of the expectations is the focus and duration. So we say that the meeting is not an exhaustive discussion of attendance for all pupils on the roll or an audit of the attendance register. The meeting should be short. It can be virtual or in person, and it's likely to be different lengths of time for different schools depending on the level of need and the numbers of pupils or pupil cohorts to be discussed. They should be focused with the allotted time prioritised in a way that benefits both the school and the local authority. And again, Jen will perhaps say a bit more about what that might look like, ways to keep it focused. But we're aware that schools and local authorities are very busy, so that's just intended so that these meetings can be really beneficial for both. I'm going to talk a little bit now about collaborative working before I hand over to Jane. We've touched on it a bit already, but collaborative working is really a key part of those targeting support meetings and a key part of our attendance guidance more widely. I guess the clues in the name of working together to improve school attendance. And just as a reminder, So local authorities are expected to provide each school with a named point of contact and the school attendance support team. And in addition to targeting support meetings, that specific point of contact will also be responsible for providing that advice and support, and that signposting and disseminating of information outside of the meeting. And again, we've got some excerpts on the screen here from our guidance that just provides a bit more detail about that collaborative working and how it's essential to good multi-agency working. I think this just really reinforces the point that the targeting support meeting isn't at all about the local authority holding the school to account, and equally it's not at all about the school offloading their casework to the local authority. It really is intended to be a meeting of two equals and to be collaborative and really a great way to focus your joint efforts and to share that expertise and experience. Jane, I'll hand over to you now to go into a bit more detail about the aims of the meeting.
Thanks, Paul. That's great. I'm Jane Lowe, as I mentioned earlier on, attendance advisor to DFE. I've had the joy of working with local authorities and trusts on the new guidance. So lots of early implementers where we've got, lots of learning to be captured. So let's have a little think about what these meetings are actually going to look and feel like in practice. I think that will help make this maybe a little bit more tangible for people. So let's have another think about the aims of the meeting. This is another direct extract from the guidance on what needs to be included in the meeting. So the focus of the meeting, the children, if you like, that you're going to talk about are those that are affected by out-of-school barriers to attendance with no existing plan in place, because you will have children who've got barriers to attendance who already do have multi-agency plans that you're contributing to, and other agencies are as well. So predominantly it's those children without a plan. And those children are going to require wraparound support. They're going to need support from the school, potentially from the local authority, and maybe even a wider set of partners to support them to re-engage with learning in a positive way and address those barriers that are preventing the children having that regular attendance routine at school. Those children who don't have out-of-school barriers, but the school would like some more advice around those children because they're struggling, they've put in support and it's not quite hitting the mark, or they're not quite there, they might want to still have a conversation around those children, even though that the barriers are in school. And that might be around a target group. It might be around the type of plan or intervention that they're looking to put into place. And they may want to have that conversation because the local authority holds so much knowledge about what other schools in the area are doing. So there'll be expertise and practice to share. They might be asking advice around a particular barrier. They might get signposted to a particular piece or person to offer specialist input to a particular group of people. So it's okay to discuss those children and think about how the school might take away that learning and work with those. Finally, by exception, children who already have that multi-agency plan in place, but those schools who feel the plan's in place, we're making our contribution as are others, but we still need more to get these children into school or to get them into school more regularly. And these are obviously going to be the most complex of cases. I'm sure that you've all experienced some of these. And in some authorities, depending on where you are, each authority is different. There will be structures that already exist to facilitate wider and deeper conversations around those children. There might be complex needs panels. There might be complex safeguarding supervision structures that operate to support schools. So when discussing these children, it might be that we signpost to other structures and functions during the meeting to have that case heard somewhere else. There might be a recommendation around escalation or intensification of support from another partner, but these cases brought by exception. What I'm hoping this diagram shows is how the agenda of a targeting support meeting could run. So it gives you some notion of the agenda and structure. And what a number of the local authorities have done that I've been working with is they've agreed the agenda with the schools prior to launch. And a number of those who adopted more than 12 months ago have reviewed that agenda to go again and think, okay, we didn't get it quite right, but this is what we're going to go with. And broadly, this is what the vast majority of my local authorities have gone with. So typically, they start the meeting off by looking at horizon scanning. At local authority level, what is the data telling us? To give the school, as part of that meeting, a notion of what's the current position locally, so they have a comparator to benchmark themselves against. And the new guidance and expectations expects us to be aware of developing provision or projects to support your locality, which might be particular cohorts of children or addressing a particular issue within the local community. So that horizon scanning homes in on what's the current position, what can we see ahead, and that could be tricky things such as barriers or patterns in the data around a particular practice, group of children, part of the community. Equally, it could be something really positive, like a new initiative or a new organisation supporting families and children around absence into school. So looking ahead and thinking about how we might deploy that resource or address that issue that's coming. And also some of those emerging themes to be aware of. That could be at local level. Equally, it could be at national level. Once they've had that wider discussion around what is the context, what can we take from that, and what might we need to be aware of, the local authority and the school then move into the discussion about the severely absent cohort, so those children who are away from school 50% or more of the time. And they'll typically share what's working with those children and what's not working in school. And the school and local authority will identify any other existing plans or multi-agency arrangements that sit around those children. The local authority might have access to information maybe that the school don't. And then typically it will be a problem-solving focused discussion around what type of support's in place, which bits of that have been successful, but what more is needed. And if we need more, what is it that's needed, and how do we maybe intensify what's already there? Problem-solving discussion around what's the focus need to be for this child. Typically, the agenda then moves on to discussion around the persistently absent cohort, where the school then have the opportunity to reflect on the support that they are deploying and the impact of it. And again, this is a really useful time to share best practice for the local authority to capture some of that great practice, but equally play back what other schools are doing. And during that discussion, there might be small groups of persistently absent children who the school and local authority reflect on and see, okay, there could be an emerging pattern here, and this child could potentially be at risk of becoming severely absent. And so therefore take some of that action sooner to prevent that growing group of severely absent children. Finally, the meeting will focus on the agenda item around legal action. And that will include fixed penalty notices, attendance contracts, notices to improve, and so on. In all cases, though, local authorities should design that meeting structure that works for the locality and the schools that they're serving. But these are the likely areas that those meetings are going to include. Paul alluded to the use of data right at the beginning of the session, and it is a really essential component in the planning but also the delivery of targeting support meetings. And that's not wanting to create heaps more work for schools and local authorities, but if we're not targeted in our focus, potentially we'll miss children, miss groups, and not target our efforts and resources in the right direction. So let's have a little closer look at data and how that might look. So this slide sets out expectations around the way in which schools share their data with partners. And Paul's already signposted how to share your data if you're not doing already. And the first commitment is to share that data with local partners on individual pupils. So for example, health services where there are medical conditions, or the police where there are extra familial harms. So you can see again that connection straight back to safeguarding, ensuring those children are safe and letting partners know where we can see worrying patterns and trends. The targeted support meeting is the focus of our discussion today, and it's this meeting that schools and local authorities will share and review the data they have at school, cohort and individual pupil level. The new guidance also sets out expectations for schools to share information directly from their registers, and as a minimum, that should include new pupil and deletion returns, attendance returns, and those new sickness returns for pupils too. This slide intends to map out how we might use data. So expectation 5 within the new guidance, so number 5 within those 7 key expectations of schools, outlines the way in which schools should regularly analyse their attendance and absence data to spot those pupils or cohorts that require support with their attendance. And the expectation 5 gives detail on how schools should monitor and analyse weekly attendance patterns, provide regular reports to class teachers, form tutors, and facilitate those discussions with children and with families. It also gives guidance on how they should identify pupils who need support. There's guidance on how to conduct thorough analysis at half-termly, termly and full year points, and also recommendations on benchmarking with local, regional and national data sets. And the new DFE data tools really support schools to do that. It encourages schools to devise strategies based on the data, so making sure we've identified the right cohorts, the right children, so that we can target our resources appropriately and have the most impact. It also reminds us, which is a really important point, that we need to monitor the impact of our improvement work. And that's an important reflection to do before heading into targeted support meetings, to think about what's working well and maybe what's not. The extract you can see here on the slide identifies that targeted responsibility for children with long-term illness, special educational needs or disabilities. It's clear that this should have a focus across senior leadership, which informs what all staff do and how staff monitor this cohort too. Then at governing body and trust board meetings, this should also form part of that targeted support meeting. This is a really important cohort of children that we need to be monitoring and taking along to that targeted support meeting if we need to do so. So let's say a little bit more about action planning for children with persistently and who are persistently absent or severely absent. So as mentioned previously, the targeted support meeting shouldn't cover those cases where joint action isn't needed, although there are some exceptions, as I mentioned. The school are going to be working with a large number of persistently absent and severely absent children all of the time to remove in-school barriers. And you're doing that extremely successfully. We can see from the data some of the improvements that have been made on your work, and we thank you for that. What the meeting should focus on are those children where the out-of-school barriers are impacting on attendance, where there's no other plan in place for the child and the family, and joint action is needed to remove those barriers and re-establish that positive routine. This part of the discussion is going to form the chunkiest part of the targeted support meeting, there's no doubt. You can see beneath the image a couple of exceptions that I've mentioned earlier, which are times where schools may ask for advice on plans they can put into place to remove those barriers that are in school. Equally, on occasion, you might want to raise those children who do have a multi-agency plan, but feel that that additional action is needed to move these children on and make those improvements. Planning for action around the severely absent cohort will require careful consideration of data around the cohort, including any group trends, reasons for absence, and also patterns at pupil level for sure. There might be procedural changes that the school need to identify and address when looking at that group data, and that could be procedures around reintegration, welcoming children back into school, putting robust part-time timetables into place, a whole host of things. Once the school and local authority have reflected on that data and shared context around each of those cases, what they should do then is put together an action plan to remove attendance barriers for those identified children. And once the local authority and the school get into a cycle of meetings, they should then reflect on the impact of those plans at each of their meetings to see, is it having the action, are the actions being taken, and is it having the impact that we intended at the following meeting? To have that cycle of review which homes in on what difference are we making to make sure that we're on track and we're making progress. So direct extracts from the guidance again. When we're looking at the persistently absent cohort who require a multi-agent response to address barriers, the school and the local authority will want to consider what the out-of-school barriers are and what additional help is needed from the local authority. And it's really useful if schools can think through that before they head into the meeting. You as the school know the children and the families far better than the local authority. You know what they're going to sign up for. You know how you've had to tailor support in the past. So go into that meeting thinking about what is it that this family and the child need. And in some cases, you'll want to discuss that and explore the different options with local authorities too. Similarly, you'll be agreeing actions for the children discussed and actions from the previous meeting to reflect again on, has that support taken hold? How do we need to intensify support further? How do we stand back and reflect on why parents or children didn't engage with that particular style or delivery of support? I hope that's been useful, and I hope it portrays what the meeting structure might look like. We've picked up, well, Paul's picked up some useful question and answers that have already come in from schools and local authorities. Paul, do you want to lead on the first part of this?
Yeah, absolutely. So, as you say, Jane, these are just questions that have come in previously, questions that we know some schools and local authorities have asked. So the first one we've got is, Jane, could you give us your views on what level of seniority of staff or what roles of staff is advisable for participating in these meetings, both from a school and local authority point of view?
Paul mentioned and echoed right at the beginning of this presentation that collaboration is key. Every school is going to have a named point of contact from the local authority, and ideally that person needs to be at the targeting support meeting from the local authority point of view. They hold the relationship with the school and are perfectly placed. From the school point of view, it needs to be the senior attendance champion. Again, that's where the relationship sits, and that person has leadership responsibility and agency to align resource and support around children, which might have implications for timetable change, calendar change, staffing changes. So they need to attend to be able to make those key decisions around children. However, there might be some additional people that you want there too. The designated safeguarding lead, I've seen them attend targeted support meetings in the local authorities that I've been to, where there's a particular cohort of children heading to the meeting and they want to provide that holistic view around the family. Equally, the SENCO can be well placed within this environment too. And if you're a larger school or a secondary school, your attendance officer who oversees registers and all of the daily procedures is also a valuable member of that targeting support meeting team.
Excellent, thank you. So the next question we've got is whether you perhaps have any words of wisdom for a local authority or school who's just starting out on the process of targeting support meetings. Maybe they're feeling a bit daunted. They feel like this is quite a big thing to be embarking on. What would you say to them?
The first thing I'd say is it's new to everybody and we're all in it together. And it is new and we're going to do some learning along the way. That's certainly been found in the local authorities that I've worked with. The first thing and the most important thing I'd say is planning is everything. So making sure that we have a look at the data prior to the meeting for school and local authority, so we know that we know what the context is. Equally, we've really thought about as a school which are those children that we want to go and discuss. Are there particular patterns that we want to raise as part of that horizon scanning or context piece of the agenda? What have we tried already that's worked well? and what is it that we're looking for if we're looking for additional support through that meeting. As a local authority, if it's feeling a bit daunting because it's feeling brand new, I would echo the same message. Planning is everything. But as a local authority, set that agenda in partnership with your schools so that everyone's going to get value from the meeting. Everybody's really clear about the expectations of the meeting. Map out roles and responsibilities. Who's going to bring what, who's going to say what, and what's going to be decided at the meeting. And have a focus on collaboration and problem solving. The children that we are discussing are often the most complex. They're not going to be straightforward answers. So a problem solving approach is a really useful one.
Brilliant, thank you. And the last question I've got for you, Jane, is I think you've touched on this a bit already, but do you have any tips for ensuring meetings are streamlined? Clearly, that's in the benefit of both the school and the local authority, but ways that they can be streamlined but still cover the really important ground.
The agenda is everything. And making sure that we adhere to the agenda too, and we don't stray from that. Time is precious for everybody, so we need to do that. The other really important piece of it that supports the planning element is a lot of local authorities have a template, and some of that's pre-populated prior to the meeting, so people arrive feeling prepared, and equally both local authority and school annotate that template during the meeting, so they go away with real clarity about what needs to be done, and they almost kind of fire through the agenda now they've got used to it.
Brilliant, thank you.
We saved the tough questions for you, Paul. And so here we go. Questions for Paul that have come out again from local authorities and others. What does it look like, Paul, in terms of what kind of services that local authorities can offer through targeting support meetings?
Yeah, brilliant. So I guess this ties into what services are part of the core function and what services local authorities can offer as traded services. So to say the two important pages to refer to and are working together to improve school attendance guidance here are pages 31 and 39. So on 31, we detail those 4 core functions that we've already talked about in this webinar. So the comms and advice, the targeting support meetings, the access to multidisciplinary support, and taking forward legal intervention where required. So all of those are part of the core offer. So we wouldn't be expecting local authorities to charge schools for those functions. But then on page 39 of the guidance, we do detail that where local authorities wish to, and where schools wish to as well, they can offer wider services to schools as part of a traded offer. And we provide some examples, definitely not an exhaustive list, but some examples on page 39 of the guidance. So there might be, for example, where a local authority is taking on the role of some of the functions it would normally expect a school to deliver. So they might be doing some first aid calling, some home visits, advice at parents' evening, or perhaps contacting families to understand what those barriers are. Alternatively, they may wish to offer to schools that they could provide some training to school staff, and all of those, if the school wished to take those services on, could be part of a traded offer.
Thanks, Paul. And the second question I've heard a few times actually. What does this look like for independent schools?
Yeah, brilliant. As you say, a question that a few schools have. And it might be that particularly that some independent schools are coming to this fairly fresh, in line with the statutory guidance taking effect from the 19th of August. The short answer is that this looks broadly the same for all schools. So all pupils have a right to a full-time education, and they and their parents should receive a similar kind of support, whatever type of school they attend. So all independent schools can expect that same core offer from their local authority, the same 4 core functions, including targeting support meetings, and in the same way that statutory expectation to engage with the meeting applies to state-funded and independent schools alike. But of course, there may be some areas where the needs of an independent school differ significantly from the state-funded schools in the same area. So where this is the case, we do say in the guidance that the expectations can be implemented in a slightly different way, where the school and local authority are in agreement. And schools and local authorities will have their own views on what this might look like. But I guess an example might be where there's a few small independent schools in an area, and perhaps the local authority and the schools agree that it would make sense to meet together to have that one targeting support meeting for all of those schools together.
Thanks, Paul. And that's what I've heard a number of authorities talk about, actually kind of upskilling that group of schools as well before heading into the meetings. The final question I'm going to put to you, Paul, is it's an interesting one. I doubt we're going to come across it very often. But what if a school or local authority refuse to have a meeting?
Yeah. Thanks, Jane. As you say, hopefully it won't come up too much. But I guess the first thing I'd say is that in line with the guidance that's coming into effect from the 19th of August, this will now be a statutory expectation for both parties. So the local authority is expected to provide that meeting, and the school is expected to take part in accordance with their safeguarding duties. So they shouldn't be refusing to meet. We do say in the guidance that if a local authority offers a targeting support meeting and the school consistently fails to take up that offer, even when the local authority follows up, then the LA will have fulfilled their expectation in that regard. But I think we'd want to start from the point that these meetings are really beneficial for both parties, and most of all for the pupils concerned. So we've said already these meetings aren't about holding to account. It's about school and LA working together to explore how they can support pupils and their families to overcome barriers to attendance. And Jane, you'll be better placed than me to comment on this because of all of the work that you've done with local authorities and schools directly. But our experience is actually that where these meetings have been taking place at schools and local authorities do find them really beneficial in that regard. Excellent.
Yeah, that's certainly the case, Paul. The local authorities that I've worked with so far, both school and local authority feedback is overwhelmingly positive about how targeted support meetings are helping support get to families much earlier.
Brilliant. That's really, really helpful. Thank you all for listening. That brings us to a close. So I'm just going to hand back over to Adam Luke to close the webinar for today.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Thank you, Paul, and thanks, Jane. Just to echo what Jane said there, I've had the pleasure of sitting in on some of those meetings this year, and really great to see that starting to happen in practice. That action setting, equal partners sitting around the table, and I know how hard lots of schools and local authorities have worked to make time to have this precious time together. School staff obviously so many things to do in the day, and carving this chunk of time out on a regular basis is difficult, I know, and similarly for local authorities, often very small and stretched teams. But we've all worked very hard to get this time in place, and hopefully this afternoon helps to everybody to make the best really of that time that we've got together. Perfect. Thank you very much to both speakers then, and thank you as always for both listening to the session and for everything you're doing on attendance. Thank you.